Address by the President of the Russian Federation to the Federal Assembly. February 29, 2024. Dear Senators, Deputies of the State Duma, esteemed citizens of Russia. Each address to the Federal Assembly is, first and foremost, a look into the future. Today, we will discuss not only our immediate plans but also strategic tasks issues that I consider fundamentally important for the confident, long-term development of our country. This program of action and concrete measures has largely been shaped through visits to the regions and direct conversations with workers, engineers from civilian and defense plants, doctors, teachers, scientists, volunteers, entrepreneurs, large families, and our heroes, veterans, volunteers, soldiers, and officers of the Russian armed forces. Of course, we understand that such events are prepared in advance. Nevertheless, the real needs of the people inevitably come through in these discussions. Many ideas have also been put forward at major public and expert forums. The proposals of citizens, their aspirations and hopes have become the foundation, the core of the projects and initiatives that will be presented today. I expect that their public discussion will undoubtedly continue because we can only implement everything we have planned together. The tasks are significant. We have already proven that we are capable of solving the most difficult tasks and responding to any challenges, no matter how complex. We, for example, repelled the aggression of international terrorism, preserved the unity of the country, and did not allow it to be torn apart. We supported our brothers and sisters and their will to be with Russia, and this year marks the 10th anniversary of the legendary Russian Spring. Even now, the energy, sincerity, and courage of its heroes, the people of Crimea, Sevastopol, and the rebellious Donbass, their love for the motherland, carried through generations, undoubtedly evoke pride. All of this inspires and strengthens confidence that we will overcome everything and that together we can accomplish anything. Indeed, as a united nation, we not only recently forced the deadly threat of a global epidemic to retreat but also demonstrated that values such as compassion, mutual support, and solidarity prevail in our society. Today, as our motherland defends its sovereignty and security, protecting the lives of our compatriots in Donbass and Novorossiya, the decisive role in this just struggle belongs to our citizens, our unity, our devotion to our homeland, and our responsibility for its fate. These qualities were clearly and unequivocally manifested at the very beginning of the special military operation when it was supported by the overwhelming majority of the Russian people. Despite all the trials and the bitterness of loss, people remain steadfast in this choice and continually reaffirm it by striving to do as much as possible for the country and for the common good. Workers are laboring in 3 shifts, as much as the front needs. The entire economy, which is the industrial and technological foundation of our victory, has shown flexibility and resilience. I want to take this moment to thank entrepreneurs, engineers, workers, and rural laborers for their responsible and intense work in the interests of Russia. Millions of people have united through the We Are Together campaign and the All-Russian Popular Front project Everything for Victory. Over the past 2 years, Russian businesses have directed billions of rubles to volunteer organizations and charitable foundations that support our fighters and their families. People are sending letters and packages to the front, warm clothes, camouflage nets, and are even contributing from their often very modest savings. I repeat, such help is invaluable. It is each person's contribution to our common victory. Our heroes on the front lines, in the trenches, where it is most difficult, know that the entire country is with them. I want to highlight the work of the Defenders of the Fatherland Fund, the efforts of the Committee of Families of the Warriors of the Fatherland, and other public associations. I ask all government bodies to continue doing everything possible to support the families of our heroes, parents, wives, and children who worry about their loved ones, waiting for them to return home. I am grateful to the parliamentary parties for their consolidation around national interests. The political system of Russia is one of the pillars of the country's sovereignty. We will continue to develop democratic institutions and will not allow anyone to interfere in our internal affairs. The so-called West, with its colonial habits and penchant for stoking national conflicts around the world, is not simply trying to restrain our development. They want a dependent, decaying, dying space instead of Russia, where they can do whatever they want. In essence, they would like to do to Russia what they have done in many other regions of the world, including Ukraine, bring discord into our home, weaken us from within. But they miscalculated. This is already absolutely clear today. They faced the firm stance and determination of our multinational people. Our soldiers and officers, Christians and Muslims, Buddhists and followers of Judaism, representatives of various ethnicities, cultures and regions have proven in action, better than 1,000 words, that the centuries-old unity and solidarity of the Russian people is a colossal, all-conquering force. All together, shoulder to shoulder, they are fighting for one common motherland. We all, the citizens of Russia, will stand together to defend our freedom, our right to a peaceful and dignified life, to determine our own path, to cherish the connection between generations, and thus the continuity of historical development, to solve the tasks facing the country based on our worldview, our traditions, our beliefs, which we will pass on to our children. Dear friends, the defense and strengthening of sovereignty are taking place today in all areas, and primarily, of course, on the front lines, where our fighters are bravely and selflessly fighting. I thank everyone who is currently fighting for the interests of the fatherland, who is going through the crucible of military trials, risking their lives every day. The entire nation bows before your heroism, mourns the fallen, and Russia will always remember its fallen heroes. A moment of silence. Our armed forces have gained immense combat experience. This applies to the interaction of all branches and arms of the military, modern tactics, and operational art. A whole generation of talented commanders has emerged and undergone a trial by fire, commanders who care for their people, execute their tasks skillfully, use new equipment, and successfully accomplish the missions set before them. And I want to say that this is true at all levels, from the platoon and operational levels to the very highest levels of command. We see where and what problems we have, of course, there are some, and we understand what needs to be done. This work is being carried out continuously, both at the front and in the rear. It is aimed at increasing the strike power of the Army and Navy, their technological advancement, and efficiency. The combat capabilities of the armed forces have increased manifold. Our units firmly hold the initiative, confidently advancing on several operational fronts, liberating more and more territories. We did not start the war in Donbass, but as I have said many times, we will do everything to end it, to eradicate Nazism, to accomplish all the tasks of the special military operation, to protect the sovereignty and security of our citizens. Our strategic nuclear forces are in a state of full readiness for guaranteed use. What we planned in the field of armaments, what I mentioned in the 2018 address, everything has been done, or this work is nearing completion. For instance, the hypersonic aviation complex Kinzhal has not only been deployed but is also being used with high effectiveness to strike particularly important targets during the special military operation. The Zircon Sea-based hypersonic strike complex, which was not even mentioned in the 2018 address, has already been used in combat. On combat duty are the Avangard intercontinental hypersonic blocks and the Peresvit laser systems. The testing of the Burevestnik cruise missile with unlimited range and the Poseidon unmanned underwater vehicle is nearing completion. These systems have confirmed their high, and without exaggeration, unique characteristics. The first serial heavy ballistic missiles, Sarma, have also been delivered to the troops, and we will soon demonstrate them in their deployment areas on combat duty. Work on several other advanced weapons systems continues, and we will learn about new achievements by our scientists and weapon designers in due time. Russia is ready for dialogue with the United States on issues of strategic stability. However, I want to emphasize, dear colleagues, so that everyone understands me correctly, in this case, we are dealing with a state whose ruling circles are taking openly hostile actions against us. And yet they seriously intend to discuss strategic stability with us while simultaneously attempting to inflict what they themselves call a strategic defeat on Russia on the battlefield? An illustrative example of such hypocrisy can be given. Recently, there have been increasingly baseless accusations against Russia, claiming that we are supposedly planning to deploy nuclear weapons in space. Such claims, nothing more than disinformation, are a ploy to drag us into negotiations on their terms, which benefit only the United States. Meanwhile, They are blocking our proposal, which has been on their table for over 15 years. I'm referring to the draft treaty on preventing the placement of weapons in space, which we prepared back in 2008. There's been no reaction. What are they even talking about? Thus, we have every reason to believe that the current American administration's statements about a supposed interest in negotiations with us on strategic stability are mere demagoguery. On the eve of the US presidential elections, they simply want to show their citizens and everyone else that they still rule the world. They imply that on issues where it benefits America to negotiate, they will talk with the Russians, and where it doesn't suit them well, then there's nothing to discuss, as they say, business as usual, where they will strive to defeat us. But that won't work, of course. Our position is clear: if you want to discuss responsible, vital security and stability issues for the entire planet, it must be done comprehensively, naturally including all aspects that affect our national interests and directly influence the security of our country, the security of Russia. We also understand that the West is trying to drag us into an arms race, thereby exhausting us, repeating the trick they managed in the 1980s with the Soviet Union. Let me remind you, from 1981 to 1988, the USSR's military spending amounted to 13% of its gross national product. Therefore, our task is to develop the defense industrial complex in such a way as to increase the scientific, technological, and industrial potential of the country. We need to allocate resources as rationally as possible and build an effective economy for the armed forces, achieving the maximum from every ruble of defense spending. It is important for us to increase the pace of addressing social, demographic, infrastructure, and other tasks while achieving a qualitatively new level of equipment for the Army and Navy. This primarily concerns general-purpose forces, their organizational principles, the delivery of strike drone systems, air defense, electronic warfare systems, intelligence and communications, precision-guided weapons, and other means of destruction. We need to significantly strengthen groupings on the Western strategic direction to neutralize the threats associated with another NATO expansion to the east, involving Sweden and Finland in the alliance. The West has provoked conflicts in Ukraine, the Middle East, and other regions of the world and continues to lie. Now, without any embarrassment, they claim that Russia is allegedly planning to attack Europe. Simply put, we understand this, they are spouting nonsense. Meanwhile, they themselves are selecting targets for strikes on our territory, choosing the most effective means of destruction as they see it. They are even discussing the possibility of sending NATO military contingents to Ukraine. But we remember the fate of those who once sent their contingents to our country. But now, the consequences for potential invaders will be far more tragic. They must finally understand that we, too, have weapons. They know this, as I just mentioned, that can strike targets on their territory. And all these scenarios they are concocting now, the threats they are making to the world, this talk of an imminent conflict involving nuclear weapons, and thus the destruction of civilization, do they not understand this? You see, these are people who have not endured severe trials. They have already forgotten what war is. We, even our current generation, have gone through such severe trials during the fight against international terrorism in the Caucasus, and now, in the conflict in Ukraine, the same thing is happening. And they think it's all just cartoons. What can I say? Indeed, Russophobia, like any ideology of racism, national superiority and exclusivity, blinds and deprives one of reason. The actions of the US and its satellites have effectively dismantled the system of European security. This creates risks for everyone. It is clear that we need to work on shaping a new framework of equal and indivisible security in Eurasia in the foreseeable future. We are ready for substantive discussions on this topic with all interested countries and associations. At the same time, I would like to emphasize once again, and I think this is important for everyone today, that without a sovereign, strong Russia, no stable world order is possible. We strive to unite the efforts of the global majority to respond to global challenges, including the rapid transformations in the world economy, trade, finance, and technology markets, where many former monopolies and stereotypes associated with them are collapsing. By 2028, the BRICS countries, considering the states that recently joined this association, will account for about 37% of global GDP, while the Group of 7 will drop below 28%. These figures are very persuasive, considering that 10-15 years ago, the situation was entirely different. I have already spoken about this publicly. These are the trends, you see? Global trends, and there is no escaping them, they are objective. Look, in 1992, the Group of 7 accounted for 45.7% of global GDP by purchasing power parity, while the BRICS countries, even without expansion, BRICS didn't exist in 1992, but the BRICS countries only 16.5%. By 2022, the Group of 7 was down to 30.3%, and BRICS was up to 31.5%. By 2028, the situation will shift further in favor of BRICS, it will be 36.6%, while the Group of 7 is projected to be 27.8%. There is no escaping this, it is an objective reality, and that is how it will be, regardless of what happens, including in Ukraine. Together with friendly nations, we will continue to establish effective and secure logistical corridors and build a new global financial architecture on an advanced technological foundation, free from political interference. This is especially pertinent as the West discredits its own currencies and banking systems, essentially sawing off the branch on which it has been sitting for decades. Our collaboration with partners is based on principles of equality and mutual respect, which is why more and more states are actively joining the work of the Eurasian Economic Union, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, BRICS, and other associations in which Russia participates. We see enormous prospects in the creation of a large Eurasian partnership by integrating the processes within the Eurasian Economic Union and China's Belt and Road Initiative. The Russia-ASEAN dialogue is developing positively. The Russia-Africa summits have become a true breakthrough, with the African continent increasingly asserting its interests and its right to genuine sovereignty. We sincerely support these aspirations. Russia has long-standing, good relations with Arab states. They represent a unique civilization stretching from North Africa to the Middle East, which is developing dynamically today. We believe it is important to seek new points of contact with our Arab friends and deepen the entire spectrum of our partnership. The same will be done in the Latin American direction. I also request the government to increase funding for international programs promoting the Russian language in our multinational culture, especially within the CIS space and globally. By the way, dear friends and colleagues, I'm sure many of you have visited the Russia exhibition. People come here to see for themselves, to show their children how rich and vast our motherland is. The exhibition marked the beginning of the Year of the Family. The values of love, mutual support, and trust are passed down in families from generation to generation, just like culture, traditions, history, and moral foundations. Of course, the primary purpose of the family is to bear children, to continue the human race, and to raise them, which means ensuring the continuity of our entire multinational people. We see what is happening in some countries where moral norms are deliberately destroyed, family institutions are undermined, and entire nations are driven toward extinction and degeneration, while we choose life. Russia has been and remains a stronghold of traditional values upon which human civilization is built. Our choice is shared by the majority of people around the world, including millions of citizens in Western countries. Yes, today Russia and many other countries face declining birth rates. Demographers claim that this challenge is linked to global social, economic, technological, cultural, and value changes. Young people pursue education, build careers, and establish their lives, postponing the birth of children. It is clear that not only the economy and the quality of the social sphere affect demographics and birth rates, but also, to a large extent, the life orientations instilled within the family, shaped by culture, education, and enlightenment. This is where the work of all levels of government, civil society, and the leaders of our traditional religions is crucial. Supporting families with children is our fundamental moral choice. A large family with many children should become the norm, the philosophy of society, and the guiding principle of the entire state strategy. Applause. I join you in your applause. Within the next 6 years, we must achieve sustainable population growth. To do so, we will take additional measures in the education system, regional and economic development. Support for families and improving their quality of life will be discussed in practically every section of this address. Please be patient, as this is just the beginning. Everything mentioned before is important, but now we move on to the main points. Let me start with one of the most pressing issues, let's put it mildly, the low incomes that many families, including those with multiple children, face. In 2000, over 42 million people in Russia lived below the poverty line. Since then, the situation has indeed changed, and changed drastically. By the end of last year, the number of people below the poverty line had decreased to 13.5 million. Of course, this is still too many. But we are keeping this issue in the spotlight. A number of measures have been implemented relatively recently. For instance, on January 1, 2023, a unified monthly allowance for low-income families was introduced, covering the period from a woman's pregnancy until the child reaches 17 years of age. Last year, over 11 million people received this allowance. We have significantly simplified the procedure for entering into a social contract, with priority given to large families. Now, applications for a social contract can be submitted through the Gosuslugi portal with a minimal set of documents. We will continue to expand the accessibility of this measure. This will require additional funds around 100 billion rubles, but these have already been allocated. I will mention these additional expenses as they arise, all of which have been carefully considered. I want to reiterate, poverty remains a pressing issue. Currently, it directly affects over 9% of the country's population, and among large families, the poverty rate, according to expert estimates, is around 30%. We need to set clear goals and steadily work towards achieving them. By 2030, the poverty rate in Russia should be reduced to below 7%, and among large families, it should be reduced by more than half, to at least 12%. In other words, we must place a special emphasis on reducing poverty, especially for large families. I understand that the overall fight against poverty is a complex and multifaceted challenge. Therefore, it is crucial that all the measures we implement in this area, and all the tools we use, are effective and yield tangible, real results for people, for our families. We need continuous efforts aimed at improving the quality of life for families with children and supporting birth rates. To this end, we will launch a new national project aptly named Family. Let me now outline several specific initiatives. First, Russian regions, in addition to federal programs, are implementing their own measures to support families with children. I would like to first thank my colleagues for this work and propose additional support for regions where the birth rate is below the national average. This is particularly important for Central Russia and the Northwest. In 2022, the total fertility rate in 39 regions was below the national average. By the end of 2030, we will allocate at least 75 billion rubles to these regions so they can enhance their family support programs. The funds will begin to be distributed next year. Second, last year, over 110 million square meters of housing were built in Russia. This is 1.5 times more than the highest Soviet figure, achieved in 1987, when 72.8 million square meters were constructed. Today, the figure stands at 110 million. Even more importantly, in the past 6 years, millions of Russian families have improved their living conditions, including over 900,000 families through the Family Mortgage Program. This program began in 2018, as a reminder. We have steadily increased its accessibility. Initially, it was available to families with 2 or more children, and then to families with just 1 child. The Family Mortgage Program is set to continue until July of this year. I propose extending it until 2030 while maintaining the key parameters. Special attention should be given to families with children under 6 years old, for whom the preferential loan rate will remain at 6%. Additionally, the state currently pays off a portion of the mortgage loan for 50,000 rubles for families upon the birth of their 3rd child. I also propose extending this provision until 2030. This year alone, nearly 50 billion rubles will be needed for this initiative, and the amount will continue to grow, but the funds are available. Overall, the goal is to make new housing more accessible to families and to ensure the systematic renewal of the country's housing stock. Third, there are over 2 million families in Russia with 3 or more children. These families are undoubtedly our pride. Here's what I want to highlight. Look at these actual figures. Between 2018 and 2022, the number of large families in Russia increased by 26.8%, a good indicator. A decree has been signed establishing a unified status for large families across the country, as requested by the public. The provisions of this decree need to be filled with concrete solutions at both the federal and regional levels, taking into account the needs of the people. In families with many children, there are many concerns, and parents should have more disposable income to address daily challenges. I propose doubling the tax deduction to 2,800 rubles per month for the second child and to 6,000 rubles per month for the third and each subsequent child. What does this mean? For example, a family with 3 children will save 1,300 rubles in their budget every month. Additionally, I propose increasing the annual income threshold eligible for the deduction from 350,000 to 450,000 rubles. This support measure should be provided automatically, without the need to submit applications. And now, a word about the Maternity Capital Program. Currently, families receive 630,000 rubles upon the birth of their first child, and an additional 202,000 rubles for the second child. The size of the maternity capital is regularly indexed. The program is set to run until early 2026. I propose extending it at least until 2030. Dear colleagues, I want to express my gratitude to charitable foundations and social non-profit organizations that help the elderly, the sick, and children with disabilities. They have done a great deal to bring the issue of long-term care to the state level because they have consistently raised these issues. I believe it is necessary to increase funding for this system from the federal budget, elevate it to a high, uniform standard, and ensure maximum accessibility for those who need it most, approximately 500,000 of our citizens. By 2030, we must ensure that 100% of those in need receive long-term care services. Currently, the average life expectancy in Russia has exceeded 73 years. We have returned to the level that existed before the COVID-19 pandemic. By 2030, the expected life expectancy in Russia should reach at least 78 years, and in the future, as planned, we aim to achieve a level of 80+. Particular attention needs to be given to rural areas and regions where life expectancy is still lower than the national average. The national project Long and Active Life will be focused on addressing these challenges. It is crucial that the increase in life expectancy is not only in years but in healthy, active years, so that people can devote their time to family, loved ones, children, and grandchildren. We will continue federal projects aimed at combating cardiovascular diseases, cancer, and diabetes. Furthermore, I propose launching a new comprehensive program focused on maternal and child health, including reproductive health, to ensure that children are born healthy and grow up healthy, and that they can, in turn, have healthy children in the future. Among the priorities of this program will be the expansion of the network of women's health clinics, the modernization of perinatal centers, children's clinics, and hospitals. Over the next 6 years, we will allocate more than 1 trillion rubles for the construction, renovation, and equipment of healthcare facilities. Furthermore, in recent years, the number of citizens who regularly engage in sports has increased significantly. This is one of our notable achievements. We need to encourage people who take responsibility for their health. Starting next year, we will provide tax deductions for those who regularly undergo scheduled medical examinations and successfully pass the GTO, Ready for Labor and Defense, standards. Remember the popular slogan? Everyone recalls the joke, "Quit drinking, take up skiing." Well, the time has come for that. Speaking of alcohol consumption, we've achieved a noticeable, positive result. Without any extreme measures, we've significantly reduced alcohol consumption, especially of strong liquor, which undoubtedly benefits the nation's health. I propose that federal resources be used to build at least 350 additional sports facilities annually in the regions, particularly in small towns and rural areas. These facilities will include multipurpose complexes and quick-to-erect sports grounds, where both children and adults, entire families, can exercise. Over the next 6 years, we will allocate around 65 billion rubles from the federal budget for these purposes. Facilities for sports should be available in universities, colleges, schools, and preschools. Many of our kindergartens were opened back in Soviet times and need renovation. We will begin a major renovation program for them next year, a need that people frequently highlight. Regarding schools, about 18,500 buildings require major repairs. By 2030, we will assist the regions in completely addressing this backlog, and moving forward, school repairs will be conducted regularly. The progress made so far shows we are on the right track. In total, we will allocate over 400 billion rubles for the major renovation of kindergartens and schools. Additionally, I propose that over the next 6 years, we update or establish medical offices in schools where they are needed, and they are indeed needed. Currently, in 2022-2023, out of 39,440 schools, only 65% have medical offices. There is still much work to be done. Another very important issue is the rapid growth of many large cities, which increases the strain on the social infrastructure. The number of students attending school in the afternoon shifts is rising, and in some schools, even a third shift has been introduced. This is undoubtedly a problem that must be resolved. In the cities where overcrowding in educational institutions is most severe, we will address the issue with federal budget resources. We will build at least 150 additional schools and over 100 kindergartens. Colleagues, the dreams and achievements of our ancestors, the older generations, have become a reality, and we take pride in these accomplishments. The future of our country will be determined by the aspirations of the current young generation. Their development, success, and life goals, which will withstand any challenge, are the most crucial guarantees of Russia's sovereignty and the continuation of our history. I propose consolidating the positive experience in youth policy and launching a new national project, Youth of Russia, this year. This should be a project about the future and for the future of our country. This is precisely how our school teachers understand their vocation, their noble mission, and responsibility for the younger generations. Thank you for your dedicated work. The role of mentors is essential in ensuring that young people feel like part of a team, find their footing in life, and have solid guidance. Starting September 1, 2024, I propose introducing a federal payment of 5,000 rubles per month for all school and college advisors on upbringing, a position that did not exist before. I also propose specific measures for class teachers and group curators in colleges and technical schools who work in communities that require special attention, namely those with populations under 100,000, which essentially includes all our small towns, district centers, villages, and rural areas. From March 1, 2024, I propose doubling the federal payment for class leadership and group curatorship in these areas to 10,000 rubles. One more point, in 2018, the May decrees established wage requirements for teachers and other public sector workers, based on the average monthly income from work activities in a particular region. The provisions of these so-called May decrees must continue to be strictly adhered to. At the same time, the system of remuneration in the public sector needs to be improved, and efforts must be made to increase the incomes of professionals working in this sector. The average salary levels across the regions vary, which means that the incomes of public sector workers, even in neighboring regions, can sometimes differ significantly. However, the work of a teacher or a doctor is equally challenging and highly responsible everywhere. Such a wide disparity in salaries from region to region is clearly unfair. I understand that this issue is long-standing, complex, and capital-intensive, if I may say so. It has been discussed with colleagues from federal agencies, regional leaders, teachers, doctors, and other professionals. Undoubtedly, it needs to be resolved. I won't go into detail now, but it is indeed a difficult issue. Both the deputies and members of the government understand what I'm talking about. I simply ask the government to develop a new wage model for public sector employees through pilot projects in the regions starting in 2025, with a final decision to be made for the entire country in 2026. A separate matter is creating additional motivation for young specialists to work in schools and see a future for professional and career growth there. For this purpose, we will allocate over 9 billion rubles from the federal budget specifically for updating the infrastructure of pedagogical universities. Our school education system has always been renowned for its innovators and unique teaching methods. It is precisely such teams of teachers that will be involved in creating advanced schools. We will start constructing the first leadership-level educational schools this year in the Ryazan, Pskov, Belgorod, Nizhny Novgorod, and Novgorod regions. Eventually, such schools will be established in all federal districts, including in the Far East, Siberia, and Donbass. In total, we will open 12 of these schools by 2030. Now, regarding the content of education. The academic workload for children should be reasonable and balanced. And, of course, it's counterproductive when what's taught in lessons doesn't match what's tested in exams. This discrepancy, unfortunately, occurs sometimes between school curricula and exam questions, forcing parents to hire tutors, which is not affordable for everyone. I ask colleagues in the government, together with the teaching and parental communities, to address this obvious issue. In this context, let's discuss the Unified State Exam, EDGE. It continues to spark widespread public debate, and we are all well aware of that. The EDGE mechanism does need improvement. What do I propose at this stage? I suggest taking another step in this direction, giving graduates what you might call a second chance, allowing them to retake the EDGE in one subject of their choice, and to do so before the university admission campaign ends, so they can submit their documents considering the retake. These may seem like minor things, but they are important to people. Colleagues, last year, the Russian economy grew at a faster rate than the global average. By this measure, we outpaced not only the leading EU countries but also all the G7 nations. However, what I want to emphasize in this regard is this: a fundamental factor in this success has been the solid foundation built over the past few decades. Today, the share of non-resource sectors in growth exceeds 90%, meaning the economy is becoming more complex, technologically advanced, and therefore much more resilient. Today, Russia is the largest economy in Europe by GDP size, measured by purchasing power parity, and the fifth largest in the world. The pace and, more importantly, the quality of this growth allow us to confidently state that in the near future, we will be able to take another step forward, entering the ranks of the world's 4 largest economies. This development should directly translate into increased incomes for Russian families. Over the next 6 years, the share of wages in the country's GDP should rise. We will index the minimum wage, MROT, at a rate that outpaces both inflation and the average wage growth in the economy. Since 2020, the MROT has increased by 50% from 12,000 to 19,000 rubles per month. By 2030, the MROT should nearly double again, reaching 35,000 rubles, which will undoubtedly impact the size of social benefits, public sector wages, and salaries in various industries. At the same time, we are aware of the risks and factors that could slow down economic growth and our overall development. These include, first and foremost, a shortage of skilled labor and the lack of advanced domestic technologies in certain areas. We need to stay ahead of these challenges, so today, I will focus on these 2 strategically important topics. Let's start with the workforce. In Russia, we have a large, growing younger generation. Interestingly, despite demographic challenges in population growth, a significant young generation is emerging. By 2030, there will be 8.3 million citizens aged 20 to 24, and by 2035, that number will rise to 9.7 million to 4 million more than today. This, of course, is partly the result of the demographic measures implemented in previous years. It is crucial for us that these young people, today's teenagers, become professionals in their fields, ready to work in the economy of the 21st century. To this end, we will launch a new national project called Workforce. We talk about this a lot, of course, but we need to actually strengthen the connection between all levels of education, from school to university. They must work in a unified manner, towards a common goal. Naturally, the involvement of future employers is important here. Starting this academic year, a career guidance system has been rolled out in all schools across the country. Students, beginning in the 6th grade, can explore various professions. I now appeal to the leaders of enterprises, scientific and medical centers, please, invite students to visit your facilities. Let them see the workshops, as I was offered during one of my trips, museums and laboratories. I ask you to actively participate in this work. We are implementing the Professionalitet project based on the principles of close cooperation between education and enterprises in the real sector. This has allowed us to update educational programs for the aviation and shipbuilding industries, pharmaceuticals, electronics, defense, and other sectors. By 2028, we will need to train about 1 million specialists in skilled trades for these industries. We should apply these approaches to the entire system of secondary vocational education, including training personnel for schools, hospitals, clinics, the service sector, tourism, cultural institutions, and creative industries. I specifically instruct the government, together with the regions, to implement a program to repair and equip secondary vocational education institutions. We need to not only renovate educational buildings but also upgrade sports facilities and dormitories in technical schools and colleges. Over the next 6 years, we will allocate 120 billion rubles from the federal budget for these purposes. Additionally, we will allocate another 124 billion rubles to carry out major repairs on about 800 dormitories of universities and colleges over the next 6 years. Now, regarding higher education in general. Our goal is for science and education centers to develop across the country. To achieve this, we will build 25 university campuses by 2030. We've already discussed this, but I believe it's necessary to reiterate. I propose expanding this program and constructing at least 40 such student towns in total. This will require allocating about 400 billion rubles from the federal budget, ensuring that these campuses provide all the necessary conditions for students, graduate students, faculty, and young families to study, work, and raise children. Overall, we need to carefully analyze all the life situations that young mothers and young parents face, and accordingly, adjust the functioning of the public services system, social services, healthcare, and urban and rural infrastructure. I ask the government and the regions to thoroughly address all these issues. Furthermore, in last year's address, I announced significant changes in the organization of higher education and the need to draw on the best domestic experience. The professional foundations of future specialists are laid during the first years of study, where fundamental disciplines are taught. I believe it is necessary to increase the level of compensation for teachers of these subjects. I ask the government to propose specific parameters for this decision and to begin implementing them in a pilot mode starting September 1. Additional resources will be required, according to preliminary estimates, about 1.5 billion rubles this year, and then 4.5 billion. These funds have already been accounted for. It is important for us to enhance the potential and quality of the entire higher education system and support universities striving for development. This is the focus of our Priority 2030 program, which is funded through the end of this year. I propose extending it for another 6 years and allocating an additional 190 billion rubles. The effectiveness of participating universities should be measured by workforce and technological projects with the regions, economic sectors, and social spheres, the creation of genuinely functioning innovative companies and startups, and the attraction of foreign students. Naturally, we will assess the work of all universities, colleges, and technical schools in Russia based on how in demand their graduates are and how their salaries grow. Dear friends, now a few words about the technological foundation of development. The bedrock here, of course, is science. At a meeting with scientists and employees of the Russian Academy of Sciences, which celebrated its 300th anniversary this year, I said that even during the most challenging times, Russia has never shied away from solving fundamental issues and has always thought about the future. We must continue to do the same now. In fact, we are striving to do just that. For example, no other country in the world today has such a spectrum of mega-science class research facilities as Russia. These offer unique opportunities not only for our scientists but also for partners and researchers from other countries whom we invite to collaborate. Our domestic scientific infrastructure is a powerful competitive advantage, both in fundamental science and in laying the groundwork for advances in pharmaceuticals, biology, medicine, microelectronics, the chemical industry, and the development of new materials, as well as for the growth of space programs. I believe we should more than double the combined investments of the state and private sector in research and development, increasing their share to 2% of GDP by 2030. This would position us among the world's leading scientific nations. I want to reiterate, private sector investment in science must also grow significantly by at least twofold by 2030. Of course, the main focus should be on the effectiveness of these investments. The goal is to achieve tangible scientific results in every specific case. We should leverage the positive experience of our federal research programs in genetics, agriculture, and the projects of the Russian Science Foundation. Given the current challenges and tasks, we have adjusted Russia's strategy for scientific and technological development. In line with this strategy, we are launching new national projects focused on technological sovereignty. Let me outline the main directions. First, we must be self-sufficient and possess all the technological keys in critical areas such as safeguarding public health and ensuring food security. Second, we need to achieve technological sovereignty in cross-cutting areas that underpin the stability of the entire national economy. This includes manufacturing equipment and machinery, robotics, all forms of transportation, unmanned aerial, marine, and other systems, data economy, new materials, and chemistry. Third, we must create globally competitive products based on unique domestic developments, including in space, nuclear, and new energy technologies. We must start now by creating a legal framework for the development of future industries and markets, and establish long-term, at least until the end of this decade, demand for high-tech products so that companies understand the rules they will operate under. We also need to establish internal cooperative chains and international technological platforms, scale up the mass production of our own equipment and components, and focus geological exploration on locating rare earth elements and other raw materials needed for the new economy. We already have everything necessary for this. I want to emphasize that this is about laying our strategic foundation for the future, which is why we will align all our existing tools and development mechanisms to address these tasks, ensuring priority budget funding. I ask the government and the Federal Assembly to take this into account when drafting the budget. I always insist that this be seen as a primary priority. Technological sovereignty projects should become the engine of renewal for our industry, helping the entire economy reach the forefront of efficiency and competitiveness. I propose setting the goal of increasing the share of domestic high-tech goods and services in the domestic market by 50% over the next 6 years, and increasing the volume of non-resource, non-energy exports by at least 2/3. Let me provide some additional figures. In 1999, imports accounted for 26% of our GDP. We were importing nearly 30% of everything from abroad. Last year, that figure was down to 19% of GDP, or 32 trillion rubles. By 2030, we need to reduce imports to no more than 17% of GDP. This means we must significantly increase our domestic production of consumer and other goods, medicines, equipment, machinery, vehicles, and so on. We can't and don't need to produce everything ourselves, but the government knows what needs to be prioritized. I want to stress that, given the demographic challenges we face, the high demand for and frankly, the shortage of skilled labor, it is critically important for us to drastically increase labor productivity. This is one of our key tasks. This implies the adoption of digital technologies in management, the growth of energy and resource-efficient economic solutions, and the implementation of these solutions, comprehensive modernization of industrial capacities, and their robotization and automation. By 2030, Russia should be among the top 25 countries in the world in terms of the number of industrial robots. Considering what we have today, achieving this would be a significant accomplishment. We will continue to establish specialized sectoral competence centers to consolidate and disseminate best practices in lean production across the economy and social sectors. By 2030, no less than 40% of medium and large enterprises in core and resource-based industries, as well as all social sector institutions, should be engaged in projects aimed at improving labor productivity. This is a vast and challenging but crucial task. Additionally, advanced engineering schools, established at universities, should be focused on increasing efficiency and re-equipping production facilities. We initially aimed to create 50 such schools, 30 have already been established, and 20 more will be launched this year. I propose expanding this program by another 50 engineering schools. This would result in a network of 100 centers across the country, which will train highly qualified specialists and offer innovative technical solutions in various fields: industry, agriculture, construction, transportation, and social sectors. Of course, artificial intelligence should be utilized in each of these areas as much as possible. We must also modernize the network of scientific and technical libraries in universities and research organizations, transforming them into true digital centers of knowledge and information. We will allocate an additional 9 billion rubles for this purpose. Dear colleagues, in recent years, hundreds of new factories, plants, and production facilities have been established in Russia. They are being launched regularly, and we have become accustomed to it. This is part of our ongoing work. However, there are also significant industrial giants among them, such as the Utykin mining and metallurgical plant in Transbaikalia, the Taishet aluminum smelter in the Irkutsk region, the Murmansk large-capacity offshore structures construction center, and Zapsibneftekhim in the Tyumen region. This list could undoubtedly be extended. I would like to draw attention to the fact that, over the next 6 years, the gross value added in Russia's manufacturing sector must increase by no less than 40% compared to 2022. This accelerated industrial development implies the creation of thousands of new production facilities and modern, well-paid jobs. We have already formed a kind of industrial menu. Companies implementing industrial projects can choose from a range of optimal support measures, such as agreements on the protection and promotion of capital investments, special investment contracts, cluster investment platforms, and so on. We have devised and applied a variety of tools. We will continue to develop all these mechanisms. For instance, over the next 6 years, we will allocate an additional 120 billion rubles in subsidies to companies for R&D, as well as for expanding industrial mortgages. Through this program, we will build and modernize more than 10 million square meters of production facilities. To give you a comparison, currently, around 4 million square meters of production facilities are built annually in Russia. This is a substantial indicator of the renewal of our industrial potential, and we will add an extra 10 million square meters. Furthermore, we will increase the Industry Development Fund by 300 billion rubles, nearly doubling its capital, to support high-tech projects. An additional 200 billion rubles will be allocated through the Cluster Investment Platform to subsidize interest rates for priority industrial production projects. To incentivize the renewal of production capacities in the manufacturing sector, I propose increasing the depreciation base for them. It will amount to 200% of the costs for Russian equipment and R&D. This may seem like a dry subject, but let me clarify. If a company purchases domestic machinery for 10 million rubles, it will be able to reduce its taxable base by 20 million. This is substantial support. We will continue to develop industrial technoparks, focusing on hosting small and medium-sized enterprises aligned with our technological priorities. It is important to leverage the benefits of a cluster approach here, where companies grow alongside their partners and suppliers, resulting in mutual benefits for all involved. I would like to emphasize to the government that by 2030, we need to create at least 100 more of these sites. They should become growth points across the entire country, stimulating capital investment. Our goal is that by 2030, investment in key sectors should increase by 70%. By the way, our progress in this area is strong indeed, very strong. The cumulative growth rate of investments in 2021 was 8.6%, exceeding the target of 4.5%. In 2022, it reached 15.9%, surpassing the planned 9.5%. And in the first 9 months of last year, while the annual target was 15.1%, growth amounted to 26.6%. We must continue to progress at this accelerated pace. Our banking system and stock market must fully ensure the flow of capital into the economy, particularly into its real sector, including through mechanisms of project and equity financing. Over the next 2 years, industrial projects with investments exceeding 200 billion rubles will be supported through equity capital funds. The essence of this mechanism is that VEB-RF Development Corporation, in cooperation with commercial banks, will invest in the equity of high-tech companies, providing support during their active growth phase. I have already instructed the launch of a special regime for initial public offerings, IPOs, of companies operating in priority high-tech sectors. I urge my colleagues at the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank to expedite the implementation of this mechanism, including compensating costs associated with the issuance of securities. This must be done, finally. Let me reiterate, the Russian stock market needs to strengthen its role as a source of investment. By 2030, its capitalization should double from the current level, reaching 66% of GDP. It is crucial that citizens have the opportunity to reliably invest their savings in the country's development and receive additional income. A decision has already been made. Voluntary contributions to non-state pension funds of up to 2.8 million rubles will be insured by the state, meaning their return is guaranteed. Additionally, long-term individual and investment accounts up to 1.4 million rubles will also be insured. A unified tax deduction will be applied to citizens' investments in long-term financial instruments of up to 400,000 rubles per year. I believe it is necessary to introduce a new instrument, the so-called savings certificate. Citizens will be able to place their savings in banks for a long term more than 3 years. The certificate will be non-revocable, meaning banks can offer clients a higher, more attractive interest income. Of course, these funds will also be insured by the state up to 2.8 million rubles, which is twice the amount insured for regular bank deposits. I must emphasize that all measures of state support for investments, as well as the creation and modernization of enterprises, must be linked to raising employee wages, improving working conditions, and enhancing social benefits for workers. Naturally, a fundamental requirement is that domestic businesses must operate under Russian jurisdiction and not transfer funds abroad, where, as it turns out, everything can be lost. Now we are meeting with our business colleagues and thinking about how to help them recover something from there. There's no need to take money abroad, and then we won't have to figure out how to get it back. Resources should be invested in Russia, in the regions, in the development of companies, and in workforce training. The most reliable protection for the assets and capital of Russian businesses is our strong, sovereign country. The vast majority of entrepreneurs hold patriotic positions rooted in our homeland. Businesses operating here in Russia must have guarantees of the inviolability of their property, assets, and new investments. Investments here and the protection of investments and the rights of entrepreneurs are undoubtedly interconnected, and we must ensure this. It is in the interests of the state, of society as a whole, and of the millions of people who work in the private sector, whether large, medium, or small businesses. I have always said, and I will say it again, no one, neither government representatives nor law enforcement officers, has the right to oppress people, violate the law, or use it for personal gain. People, including those from the business community, and I am specifically talking about them now, need help. They create jobs, provide employment, and pay wages. This is the calling of the government to assist. Dear colleagues, small and medium-sized businesses are making an increasingly significant contribution to economic growth. Today, their share in sectors such as manufacturing, tourism, and IT exceeds 21%. Hundreds of new domestic brands have emerged. Last year, 1.2 million new small and medium-sized enterprises were registered in Russia. I would like to highlight that this is the highest figure in the past 5 years. People are eager to start their own businesses, they believe in themselves, in their country, and in their success. Notably, the number of young entrepreneurs under 25 years old grew by 20% in 2023. Today, there are more than 240,000 of them. This creative energy must be supported to ensure that the average income of employees in small and medium-sized businesses grows faster than GDP over the next 6 years. This means increasing the efficiency and qualitative indicators of such businesses. As I've mentioned before, we must avoid a situation where companies are discouraged from scaling up due to the sharp rise in tax payments when transitioning from a simplified to a general tax regime. This essentially pushes businesses towards fragmentation and other so-called optimization methods to reduce their fiscal burden. I urge the government, in collaboration with parliamentarians, to develop parameters for an amnesty for small companies that, due to actual business growth, were compelled to use tax optimization schemes. What's important here? These companies must, of course, abandon artificial, essentially fictitious, business fragmentation and move to normal, civilized, transparent operations. I must emphasize, there will be no penalties. This is crucial. No penalties, sanctions, or tax reassessments for previous periods. This is the essence of the amnesty. Furthermore, I instruct the government to establish a mechanism from next year that provides for a gradual, not abrupt, increase in tax burden for companies transitioning from simplified to general taxation. Next, we implemented temporary moratoriums on inspections, a measure that has proven entirely justified. Companies that guarantee high-quality goods and services and are accountable to consumers can and should be trusted. Therefore, I believe that from January 1, 2025, we can discontinue the temporary moratoriums on business inspections and instead, based on accumulated experience, fully transition to a risk-based approach, enshrining it in law. Where risks are absent, we should apply preventive measures and thus minimize the number of inspections. Additionally, I propose granting small businesses a special right to take loan holidays of up to 6 months once every 5 years without affecting their credit history. I repeat, we must create all the conditions for small and medium-sized enterprises to develop dynamically, with the quality of this growth being enhanced through high-tech areas of industrial business. Overall, the tax regime for manufacturing enterprises within the small and medium-sized business sector should be eased. I ask the government to present concrete proposals on this matter. We've discussed it many times, and these proposals are now essentially ready. I would like to particularly highlight the work of small and medium-sized businesses in rural areas and the agricultural sector. Today, we not only fully provide for our own food needs, but Russia is also a leader in the global wheat market. We are among the top 20 food exporting countries. I want to thank agricultural workers, farmers, and specialists engaged in agriculture as a whole. Thank you for your impressive results. By 2030, the output of Russia's agricultural sector should increase by at least a quarter compared to 2021, and exports should grow by 1.5 times. We will certainly continue to support the industry, as well as the program for the comprehensive development of rural areas, including the renovation and modernization of post offices. We will also take special measures to develop coastal regions. Let me remind you, we have a quota under the Kiel Rule, which must be strictly enforced. As some of you here know, this means that companies receive quotas for seafood extraction in exchange for a commitment to purchase new fishing vessels of Russian production and renew their fleet. At the same time, this year the federal budget received substantial funds, about 200 billion rubles, from the sale of seafood quotas. Anton Germanovich Siluanov and I have agreed. I propose that part of these funds be allocated specifically for the social development of municipalities that serve as the base for our fishing industry. Colleagues, in today's conditions, improving efficiency across all spheres of labor productivity is inextricably linked with digitalization and the use of artificial intelligence technologies, as I have already mentioned. These solutions allow us to create digital platforms that optimally facilitate interaction between citizens, businesses, and the state. We aim to create a platform that will help citizens maintain and preserve their health throughout their lives, leveraging the full potential of the healthcare system. For instance, based on data from their digital profile, a citizen could receive a remote consultation from a specialist at a federal medical center, while a general practitioner or family doctor could assess the overall health picture, predict the onset of diseases, prevent complications, and select an individualized and therefore more effective treatment strategy. Everything I am discussing is not some distant future speculation. These practices are already being implemented in leading medical centers. The goal is to expand these practices nationwide, making them widespread and accessible. I believe that by 2030, digital platforms should be established across all key sectors of the economy and social sphere. These and other complex tasks will be addressed within the framework of the new national project Data Economy. We will allocate at least 700 billion rubles for its implementation over the next 6 years. For the state, such technologies and integrated platforms provide vast opportunities for planning and developing the economy of specific industries, regions, and cities, and for efficiently managing our programs and national projects. Most importantly, we will continue to align the work of all levels of government around the interests of every individual and family, proactively providing state and municipal services to citizens and businesses in a convenient format, with the fastest possible delivery of results. By the way, Russia is already one of the world leaders in the implementation of electronic government services. Many countries, including those in Europe, have yet to reach our level. However, we, too, must continue to move forward and not stand still. Artificial intelligence algorithms are a critical element of digital platforms. Here, we must also be self-sufficient and competitive. A decree has already been signed approving an updated version of the National Strategy for Artificial Intelligence Development. It sets new goals, including ensuring technological sovereignty in revolutionary areas such as generative artificial intelligence and large language models. The implementation of these technologies promises to be a real breakthrough in the economy and social sphere. To achieve this breakthrough, we need to enhance our computing resources. By 2030, the combined power of domestic supercomputers should be increased by at least 10-fold. This is an entirely realistic goal. Overall, we must develop the entire infrastructure of the data economy. I urge the government to propose specific measures to support companies and startups that manufacture equipment for data storage and processing and develop software. The growth rate of investments in domestic IT solutions should at least double the growth rate of the economy. Digital systems must be accessible not only in megacities but also in small towns, rural areas, remote regions, and along federal, regional, and local roads. To achieve this, by the end of this decade, we need to ensure high-speed internet access across almost the entire territory of Russia. This task will be accomplished, in part, by significantly expanding our satellite constellation, with 116 billion rubles allocated for its development. Dear colleagues, I would now like to focus on regional development. What is being proposed? First and foremost, we need to reduce the debt burden on the regions of the Russian Federation. I believe it is necessary to write off 2/3 of the region's debt on budget loans. It is estimated that this will allow them to save around 200 billion rubles annually from 2025 to 2028. I would like to emphasize that these savings must be earmarked and specifically directed by the regions towards supporting investments and infrastructure projects. Colleagues, I draw your attention to this. Next, in 2021, we launched an infrastructure budget loan program worth 500 billion rubles, which was later expanded to 1 trillion rubles. Let me remind you that these loans are provided to regions at an annual rate of 3% for up to 15 years. This is an excellent tool for development. These funds are allocated for development projects, and the regions have noted the high effectiveness of this mechanism. These loans are not being written off, but starting this year, the regions will begin repaying these debts. I propose that the funds returned to the federal budget be reinvested in regional development, directing them towards issuing new infrastructure budget loans. Moreover, starting in 2025, we will increase the portfolio of infrastructure loans to the regions by at least 250 billion rubles annually. I also believe that regions should be given more flexibility in managing funds to achieve the goals of national projects. Let me give you a concrete example. Suppose a region is modernizing a clinic and has completed high-quality renovations. If there are leftover funds, these should not be returned to the federal budget but could instead be used to purchase equipment for the renovated clinic, and so on. Of course, we will support regions with development potential that need assistance in unlocking it, launching projects in the real economy and infrastructure that will become drivers of growth in these areas. Currently, 10 regions with low budgetary resources are implementing individual socio-economic development programs. I ask the government to extend these programs for another 6 years. By 2030, all our regions should become more economically self-sufficient. I reiterate, this is a matter of fairness, equal opportunities for citizens to realize their potential, and ensuring high living standards across the entire country. Dear colleagues, as we can see, the plans are ambitious, and the expenditures are significant. We face large-scale investments in the social sphere, demography, economy, science, technology, and infrastructure. In this context, I want to address the tax system. It must ensure the flow of resources necessary to tackle national tasks and implement regional programs. The tax system should also reduce inequality, not only within society but also in the socio-economic development of the regions. It should take into account the income levels of citizens and companies. I propose that we consider approaches to modernizing our fiscal system, aiming for a more equitable distribution of the tax burden toward those with higher personal and corporate incomes. Conversely, we need to reduce the tax burden on families, including through deductions that I mentioned earlier. We should encourage businesses that invest in development and the implementation of infrastructure and social projects. At the same time, it is essential to close any loopholes that some companies use to evade taxes or underreport their tax obligations. I ask the State Duma and the government to present a concrete set of proposals on this matter in the near future. Furthermore, based on the adopted changes, I suggest fixing the main tax parameters until 2030 to provide stable and predictable conditions for implementing all investment projects, including long-term ones. This is precisely what businesses request during our direct interactions. Dear colleagues, decisions regarding financial support for the regions and economic growth must work towards improving the quality of life for people across all regions of the Federation. We have already extended until 2030 the special development programs for regions such as the North Caucasus and Kaliningrad Oblast, Donbass and Novorossiya, Crimea and Sevastopol, the Arctic and the Far East. Development master plans have been prepared for 22 cities and agglomerations in the Far East, and similar work is underway for settlements in the Arctic. Now, we must take the next step. I propose identifying a list of more than 200 additional large and small cities. Each of these cities should have its own master plan developed and implemented. Overall, the development program should encompass about 2,000 settlements, including villages and small towns. The support measures for the regions that I mentioned earlier, including infrastructure loans, should also be utilized here. I would like to address the heads of the regions. These resources should be used to expand the capabilities of municipalities as well. I recall meeting with some municipal leaders at their forum here in Moscow. Local governments hold a special role and responsibility, as they are the first point of contact for citizens with their everyday needs. I want to thank our mayors, district heads, and deputies for your hard work and attention to the needs of the people. I would also like to especially acknowledge the municipal employees who work in close proximity to the conflict zones, sharing in the hardships faced by their fellow citizens. The residents of these cities and towns should be co-authors of their development plans. We need to actively utilize mechanisms that allow citizens to determine which projects and issues should receive funding as a priority. I propose increasing co-financing for such grassroots projects from federal and regional budgets. We will also extend the nationwide competition for the best projects to create a comfortable urban environment in small towns and historical settlements until 2030. Across Russia, over the next 6 years, we will improve more than 30,000 public spaces. I ask the government to provide additional support to regions that are reconstructing embankments, parks, squares, and historical city centers. We will allocate 360 billion rubles for beautification and major projects in this area. Historic buildings, estates, and churches are the tangible embodiment of our national identity and the unbroken connection between generations. I ask the government, parliamentarians, and the relevant commissions of the State Council, with public participation, to analyze the regulatory framework in the field of cultural heritage protection and use. We need to eliminate excessive and contradictory requirements that sometimes lead to a monument's deterioration before legal measures can be taken to save it. I propose developing a long-term program for the preservation of Russia's cultural heritage sites, with the goal of adopting it for a 20-year period. We should provide support to citizens, companies, and public organizations willing to invest their work, time, and resources in the restoration of monuments. This year, we will pilot such mechanisms in a project run by the DOM-RF Development Institute. 5 regions will participate: Zabakalsky Krai, Novgorod, Ryazan, Smolensk, and Tver oblasts. By 2030, we must restore at least 1,000 cultural heritage sites across the country, giving them a new lease on life so they can serve the people and enhance our cities and villages. We will certainly continue our foundational cultural projects and maintain their funding. We will renew the infrastructure of museums, theaters, libraries, cultural centers, art schools, and cinemas. Over the next 6 years, we will allocate an additional 100 billion rubles to educational, historical, and other creative projects in film, online platforms, and social networks. I also propose expanding the Pushkin Card program, which allows students and young people to visit cinemas, museums, theaters, and exhibitions for free, while also providing cultural institutions with incentives to develop and launch new projects, including those involving businesses. I ask the government to prepare additional proposals on this. Furthermore, starting in 2025, we will launch a rural cultural worker program, similar to the rural teacher and rural doctor programs. This idea has been frequently raised during meetings. A specialist who relocates to work in a village or small town will receive a one-time payment of 1 million rubles. In the Far East, Donbass, and Novorossiya, this amount will be doubled to 2 million rubles. Another important decision that needs to be refined and adopted is to provide special family mortgage terms specifically for small towns and regions where new multi-story residential buildings are either scarce or non-existent. This must be done as quickly as possible, with a focus on key parameters such as the initial down payment and interest rate. I ask you to keep this in mind, and I will be awaiting your proposals. Additionally, we will continue the special mortgage programs with a 2% interest rate for residents of the Far East and the Arctic, as well as Donbass and Novorossiya. Participants and veterans of the special military operation in these regions will also be eligible for loans under these favorable conditions. We will also support projects for the comprehensive development of territories for construction, creating residential neighborhoods with full infrastructure in regions that still have a low level of social and economic development, where many of our usual initiatives do not work. For these territories, we will allocate an additional 120 billion rubles. This leads us to the next systemic task. With federal support, many regions have significantly increased the pace of resettling residents from dilapidated housing. Over the past 16 years, 1.73 million people have moved into new apartments. It is crucial to maintain this momentum over the next 6 years. I ask the government to prepare and launch a new program for resettling residents from unsafe housing. Regarding utilities, we will accelerate the modernization of communal infrastructure. In total, 4.5 trillion rubles, including private investments, will be allocated for this purpose by 2030. We will also continue our clean water project. This issue is particularly urgent for many of our cities and rural communities, focusing on reliable access to high-quality drinking water. Another important issue is gasification. We plan to supply this environmentally friendly fuel to cities and districts in Yakutia, Buryatia, Khabarovsk, Primory, Zabakalsky Krai, Murmansk, and Amur oblasts, the Jewish Autonomous Oblast, Karelia, and the major city of Krasnoyarsk. We will also use LNG to gasify Kamchatka and several other regions. Naturally, this will allow us to expand the social gasification program, which has already provided free gas connections to the boundaries of 1.1 million plots. Applications are still being accepted, and for eligible categories of citizens, including families of participants in the special military operation, we are assisting with gas pipeline installation within the plots. What else would I like to emphasize right now? Within the boundaries of many populated areas where gas networks have already been established, there are gardening cooperatives. People have been tending their land for years, sometimes for generations, and are now building homes that can be lived in year-round. However, they are unable to connect to the gas networks because these cooperatives are not included in the social gasification program. This issue affects millions of families. It must, without question, be resolved in favor of our citizens by expanding the social gasification program to extend the networks to the boundaries of plots with homes in gardening cooperatives. Additionally, residents of remote northern and far eastern territories, where there won't be gas networks in the coming years, will receive support. Currently, they heat their homes with coal or wood. Now, with state subsidies, they will be able to purchase modern, eco-friendly equipment, specifically domestically produced. Priority support should be given to the most vulnerable families. We will allocate an additional 32 billion rubles for this purpose. Taking modern environmental standards into account, we will develop public transport and reduce its age. By 2030, the regions will receive approximately 40,000 buses, trolleybuses, trams, and electric buses. We will allocate an additional 150 billion rubles from the federal budget for this public transport renewal program. We will also renew the fleet of school buses, at a rate of no less than 3,000 vehicles per year, which is particularly important for small towns and rural areas. Both residents and local and regional leaders have highlighted the importance of this program. Therefore, we will allocate an additional 66 billion rubles for the purchase of school buses. And, of course, this must be equipment produced in Russia, either entirely or with a high degree of localization. Under the Clean Air Project, as you know, harmful emissions have been reduced in 12 industrial centers in Russia. Since last year, 29 more cities have joined the project. Nationwide, harmful emissions into the atmosphere must be halved. We will work towards this goal gradually, and to assess the results, we will create a comprehensive environmental monitoring system. Over the past 5 years, thousands of kilometers of rivers and shorelines have been cleaned, and polluted discharges into the Volga have been reduced by nearly half. Now, I propose setting a goal to cut pollution of Russia's major water bodies by half. In the last 5 years, 128 large landfills in cities and 80 sites of accumulated environmental damage, which were literally poisoning people's lives in 53 regions of Russia, have been eliminated. The territories of the Krasny Bor landfill, the Baikal pulp and paper mill, and Usoli-Sibirskoye have been brought to a safe state. What would I like to emphasize in this regard, esteemed colleagues? Only the most urgent measures have been taken at these sites, but that is far from enough. Leaving them in their current state is absolutely out of the question. We must see this work through to the end and create all the necessary infrastructure. Throughout Russia, we will continue to eliminate the most dangerous sites of accumulated environmental damage. Over the next 6 years, at least 50 such high-risk environmental sites must be cleaned up. We must create incentives for businesses to adopt green technologies and move towards a circular economy. Especially since we have essentially built a modern waste management industry from scratch. 250 enterprises have been constructed for waste processing and disposal. The goal by 2030 is to sort all solid waste that can be sorted, with at least a quarter of it being recycled. We will allocate additional funds for such projects and, together with businesses, will build approximately 400 more waste management facilities and 8 eco-industrial parks. What else do I want to say? During meetings with citizens in the Far East, Siberia, and other regions, the issue of preserving our forest resources was frequently raised, including the need to address illegal logging and forest conservation. This issue resonates strongly with the public. It is important to almost everyone, and we are collectively joining forces to address it, gradually improving the situation. A significant milestone: since 2021, more forests have been restored in Russia than have been cut down. I want to thank the volunteers, school children, students, and all citizens who planted trees and participated in environmental actions, as well as businesses for supporting such projects. We will certainly continue to restore forests, parks, and gardens, including around urban agglomerations and industrial centers. As a separate initiative, I propose increasing the salaries of specialists working in forestry, meteorology, and environmental protection, those who address the crucial issues of ecological well-being. We must honestly acknowledge that while the work they do is very important, their earnings are quite modest. To support civic initiatives in environmental protection, I believe it is necessary to establish a fund for ecological and conservation projects. Initially, the total annual grant amount for this fund will be 1 billion rubles. Work will also continue on preserving specially protected natural areas, as well as protecting and restoring rare and endangered species of plants and animals. In this regard, I propose considering the creation of a network of rehabilitation centers for injured and confiscated wild animals. By 2030, we will develop ecotourism infrastructure in all of the country's national parks, including eco-trails and hiking routes, such as weekend routes for school children, as well as recreational areas, museums, and visitor centers. Modern and safe infrastructure will also be established near water bodies, including Lake Baikal. By 2030, a year-round resort will be opened there. It is crucial that we strictly adhere to the principle of zero pollution, meaning no waste or untreated discharges into the lake. The construction of the Baikal Resort will be part of the major 5Cs project. Modern hotel complexes will also be built along the shores of the Caspian, Baltic, Azov, Black, and Japan Seas. This project alone will increase domestic tourism by an additional 10 million people per year. Overall, considering the dynamic development of such tourist centers as Altai, Kamchatka, Kuzbas, the North Caucasus, Karelia, and the Russian North, by 2030, the tourist flow should nearly double to 140 million people per year. As a result, tourism's contribution to Russia's GDP will also double to 5%. We will soon develop additional measures to achieve this. Tourism and regional development are supported by transportation infrastructure. High-speed highway traffic has already opened between Moscow and Kazan, and this year, the highway will be extended to Ekaterinburg, and next year, to Tyumen. Eventually, this modern and safe route will span the entire country to Vladivostok. Additionally, over the next 6 years, more than 50 bypasses around cities will be built across Russia. A new significant highway project is, of course, the construction of the Zhubka-Sochi route. It will reduce travel time from the M4 Don Highway to Sochi by 4 times to just 1.5 hours and, moreover, it will foster the active development of the Black Sea coast. However, I want to immediately point out we have agreed with the government, and I want to state this publicly as well, this is, of course, a complex and capital-intensive project, with tunnels and bridges throughout. It's an expensive project. Nonetheless, I ask the government to present a financing plan for it. Please work on this. We have already upgraded federal highways and nearly 85% of roads in large urban agglomerations. We must maintain this standard. At the same time, in the coming years, we will place a special emphasis on developing regional roads. Air travel must become more accessible. We need to increase what is called aviation mobility, and by 2030, the intensity of air traffic in Russia should grow by 50% compared to last year. To achieve this, we plan to accelerate the development of domestic and inter-regional air services. Here, the government faces a specific task, to modernize the infrastructure of at least 75 airports over the next 6 years. This represents more than a third of Russia's airport network. We will allocate no less than 250 billion rubles for this purpose, which will come directly from the budget. We also need to renew the fleet of our airlines with domestically produced aircraft. These aircraft must meet all modern standards of quality, comfort, and safety, a challenging task. We purchased too many aircraft abroad and did not develop our own production. Nonetheless, advanced Russian developments in mechanical engineering, construction, communications, and digital systems will be in demand in creating a network of high-speed railways as well. I'll say a few words on this topic too. The first route between Moscow and St. Petersburg will pass through Tver and our ancient capital, Veliki Novgorod. After that, we will lay high-speed rail lines to Kazan and the Urals, to Rostov-on-Don, the Black Sea coast, Minsk, in our brotherly Belarus, and other popular destinations. The large-scale modernization of the central transportation hub will continue. The Moscow central diameters will form the basis for connecting the capital region with Yaroslavl, Tver, Kaluga, Vladimir, and other regions with modern high-speed routes. It is also essential to modernize the backbone network of internal waterways, which will create additional economic benefits in tourism, industrial development, and the growth of certain sensitive and crucial regions for us, including the far north. What do I want to add here? Modern infrastructure directly contributes to the increased capitalization of all assets in the country. Regions that tap into their transit and tourism potential can bring land into circulation for industrial and agricultural projects. For citizens, this means the opportunity to build homes for large families and live in more comfortable conditions. For businesses, it opens new prospects, including in international markets. In this context, a specific issue that was raised during one of my meetings is the long queues at border checkpoints. This problem is particularly acute in the Far East. According to regulations, customs inspections should take 19 minutes, but in reality, truck drivers often wait at the border for hours. The Ministry of Transport has a clear task: the standard time for inspecting cargo transport at the border should not exceed 10 minutes. Modern technologies make this possible. These requirements are also crucial for the smooth operation of the North-South Transport Corridor, which will connect Russia with countries in the Middle East and Asia. The corridor's foundation will consist not only of road routes but also of seamless railway connections from our ports on the Baltic and Barents Seas to the shores of the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean. We will also increase the capacity of railroads heading south, which will allow for the active use of the port facilities on the Azov and Black Seas. The third phase of expanding the Eastern Railway Corridor, the Baikal-Amur Mainline, BAM, and the Trans-Siberian Railway is being launched. At one point, we, excuse my bluntness, dropped the ball a bit, failing to do certain things on time. But now we must catch up, and we will. By 2030, their capacity will increase from 173 million tons to 210 million tons per year. Simultaneously, the development of the Vanino and Sovetskaya Gavin ports must progress. The further development of the Northern Sea Route remains a top priority. We invite international logistics companies and countries to actively use the potential of this global transport corridor. Last year, 36 million tons of cargo passed through it. I want to draw your attention to this, colleagues. This is 5 times the record level during the Soviet Union. 5 times. We will ensure year-round navigation on the Northern Sea Route. We will boost the operations of our northern ports, including the Murmansk Transport Hub, and, of course, expand our Arctic fleet. Last year, the unique research icebreaker platform Severny Polyus set sail. Early this year, a new nuclear icebreaker Leningrad was launched at the Baltic shipyard. Next year, we will lay down another vessel of the same class, Stalingrad. Meanwhile, at the Zvezda shipyard in the Far East, a next-generation icebreaker, Lider, with twice the power, is under construction. We also plan to significantly renew our merchant fleet, including tankers, gas carriers, and container ships, using our domestic shipyards. This will enable Russian businesses to establish efficient trade flows in the face of changing logistics and drastic shifts in the global economy. Dear citizens of Russia, friends, I would like to say something special. I regularly meet with participants of the special military operation. These include professional soldiers, volunteers, and civilians who were mobilized for military service. All of them have taken up arms to defend the motherland. You know, I look at these brave people, sometimes very young men, and I can say without any exaggeration, my heart fills with pride for our people, for our nation, and for these individuals in particular. Without a doubt, they will not retreat, they will not fail, and they will not betray. They should be the ones to take leading positions in education, youth training, civic organizations, state companies, businesses, government, and municipal administration. Ultimately, they should head regions, enterprises, and the largest national projects. These true heroes and patriots are often quite modest and reserved in life. They don't boast of their achievements or use grand slogans. But in critical moments of history, it is precisely such people who step forward and take responsibility. These are the people who think of the country, live for its future, and to whom we can entrust Russia. You know, the word elite has largely discredited itself. This term has been tarnished by those who, without any real merits to society, consider themselves a special caste with exclusive rights and privileges. I'm particularly referring to those who lined their pockets during the economic upheavals of the 1990s. They are certainly not the elite. Let me reiterate, the true elite are those who serve Russia, the workers and soldiers who are reliable and tested, who have proven their loyalty to Russia through their deeds. These are the worthy people. In this regard, I want to announce a new and, I believe, important decision. Starting tomorrow, March 1, 2024, veterans of the special military operation, as well as soldiers and officers currently fighting in active units, will be able to apply for participation in the first training session of a special personnel program. We will call it Time of Heroes. I won't hide the fact that this idea came to me when I met with students who participated in the special military operation in St. Petersburg. This program will be built on the same standards as our best projects, the Higher School of Public Administration, also known as the Governor's School, and the Leaders of Russia competition. Graduates from these programs have risen to prominent positions across various sectors, even becoming ministers and regional leaders. Participants in this program will include military personnel and veterans with higher education and managerial experience, regardless of rank or position. What matters most is that these individuals have demonstrated their best qualities and shown that they can lead their comrades. The training will begin in the coming months. The first participants will be mentored by leaders from the government, the presidential administration, federal ministries, agencies, regional heads, and our largest companies. In the future, we will expand such personnel programs and launch management courses at the Russian Academy of National Economy and Public Administration, whose status I believe should be elevated through legislation. Moreover, veterans and participants in the special military operation will be given priority in obtaining higher education and civil specialties at our leading universities. I ask the Ministry of Defense and the commanders of combat units to support the desire of soldiers and officers to test their abilities in the new personnel program, and to provide them with the opportunity to apply and attend in-person classes. I would like to emphasize that participants in the special military operation, whether they are privates, sergeants, or combat officers, already form the backbone of our armed forces. And, as I've said before, those who intend to continue their military careers will receive priority in promotions, as well as in their admission to command courses, military schools, and academies. Dear friends, self-reliance, self-sufficiency, and sovereignty must be proven and reaffirmed every day. This is about our responsibility, and ours alone, for the present and future of Russia. This is our homeland, the land of our ancestors, and it matters to us, and only to us, and of course, to our descendants, to whom we must pass on a strong and prosperous country. In recent years, we have managed to build a management system and implement national projects based on new principles, leveraging large data sets and modern digital technologies. This has enabled us to increase efficiency, manage risks, consider all available information, and continuously fine-tune projects and programs, relying on feedback from our citizens. I want to thank my colleagues in the government, departments, and regions who have painstakingly built this system over the years, during both the pandemic and the sanctions aggression against Russia. I know this was a difficult, complex task, and importantly, it is already yielding results. We see this in the outcomes. We will continue to operate in this manner. By the end of the year, all national projects discussed today must be approved and coordinated with one another. I want to emphasize once again, these are not the projects of individual departments, they must contribute to overarching systemic objectives and the achievement of our national development goals. In this regard, I ask the All-Russian People's Front to continue monitoring the implementation of decisions at all levels of government. I want to stress that the primary measure of success for our programs is not in tons, kilometers, or the amount of money spent. The most important metric is how people's lives improve. The scale of the historical challenges facing Russia demands the utmost clarity and coordination between the state, civil society, and business. I believe it is essential to not only prepare the budget for the upcoming 3-year period but also to plan all major expenses and investments through 2030. Essentially, we need to develop a 6-year forward-looking financial plan for the country's development, which we will, of course, supplement with new initiatives. Naturally, life will bring adjustments. Despite the challenging period, despite the current trials and difficulties, we are laying out long-term plans. The program I outlined today in the address is objective and fundamental. It is a program for a strong, sovereign country that looks confidently to the future. We have the resources and immense opportunities to achieve our goals. But I must emphasize the most important point: the success of all our plans today directly depends on our soldiers, officers, volunteers, all service members currently fighting on the front lines, on the courage and determination of our comrades in arms who defend our motherland, rise to the attack, advance under fire, and sacrifice themselves for us, for the fatherland. It is they, our warriors, who are creating the absolutely essential conditions for the future of the country and its development. We owe you a great debt of gratitude, gentlemen. I thank all of you, esteemed colleagues, and all the citizens of Russia for your solidarity and reliability. We are one big family, we are united, and because of this, we will achieve everything we plan and strive to achieve, everything we dream of. I believe in our victories, in our successes, in Russia's future. Thank you.